I actually saw you had written the book and I was like, oh man, I got to get Jeff on. Some random dude messaged me on LinkedIn like, well, I'd like to have Jeff Hendrickson. He wrote this book. I'm like, can I just message him? Do I have to go through you?
I know. And they even asked me because they brought your name up and I go, yeah, I worked with Jeremy at GE. No sweat.
That's really
but they
funny.
wanted to keep it super formal for some reason. Like we didn't know each other. And I'm like, I know him. I see him in the grocery store.
That's so hilarious, dude. I love it. Oh, well, yeah, it's good. At least they're like treating it professionally, I guess. That's good. That's what you want in a publishing company, I guess.
Yeah,
right?
I guess so.
Anyway, you ready?
Yeah.
Let's do it. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome to the show. I am super stoked to have you. Before we jump into the normal stuff today, I want to give a shout out to Balint for leaving some incredible feedback for the Beyond UX Design book, Master Your Craft, Beyond Pixels and Prototypes. And don't forget, if you get the book from beyonduxdesign.com/book, you leave some honest feedback, you'll get a chance to win a shout out on the show, just like this one. So head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/book and use the code LISTENER to get 10% off your copy today. This week's episode is brought to you by Mento Design Academy, where it's not just about learning UX design, it's about discovering your unique path in it. Their approach is different, it's personal, it's tailored to you. They don't just teach, they inspire students to use their passions as a driving force in their learning, and that is something that I've experienced firsthand as a mentor. I've been fortunate enough to guide students who are exploring concepts that they're truly passionate about. It's not just about following a curriculum, it's about shaping that curriculum around what excites each student. And this approach emphasizes not just knowledge, but a deep love for the discipline and seeing my mentees grow and apply their passions and craft portfolios that are genuinely them. It's been one of the most rewarding experiences of my career. So if you're looking for a UX course that's as unique as you are, check out Mento Design Academy. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/Mento. And just for my listeners, use the promo code BeyondUX200 to get $200 off the course. So join Mento and let your passions lead your learning journey. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. If you are a regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you can imagine. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, and Kevin for all their support. And if you want to join these fine folks and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you can become a patron for as little as $3 a month. That's less than $1 an episode. And if you do that, you'll get some sweet, sweet perks to your support. For more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing here, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. And of course, if you think this show is worth sharing, then I would love it if you told some friends. So I am super excited to have not just a random person from the internet, but someone I actually know well and I've worked with in the past, someone that I run into at the grocery store every once in a while, my good buddy, Jeff Hendrickson. I am so excited to have Jeff on. Jeff's career is a remarkable blend of creativity, technology, and a forward-thinking approach to UX design. And from his early days in a sleepy Southwest Ohio town to bustling New York's fashion industry to leading global tech teams and innovating at the Pentagon, Jeff has consistently pushed boundaries. His expertise extends to the realm of artificial intelligence, where he has been creating his own GPT models, contributing to the evolving AI landscape. And this initiative also includes organizing events showcasing AI artists, with a particularly successful event in August and an upcoming one in June of this year. Now residing in Cincinnati, Ohio, Jeff's multifaceted work continues as he writes, he coaches, he brings creative projects to life through his company Alchemy Entertainment Group, highlighting his commitment to blending art, technology, and user-centric design in new and unique ways. He's also the author of several books, including Unleashing the Power of UX Analytics, which is why we're going to talk to Jeff today. So Jeff, I am so excited to have you on the show. Finally, we've been talking about this for, I don't know how long, man, like year and a half or something.
We have.
So I'm so excited to have you on, man. How's it going?
Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me onto this. I know you've got a great listenership out there, and you're doing a great service. I mean, with the mentor thing that you're doing as well,
Thanks,
you're doing
man.
a lot of fantastic stuff for this community out here. So thank you for doing that.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. And, I didn't mention your podcast. We'll have to give yourself a little plug later and so everybody can find your show too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
Cool.
Jeff,
Awesome.
we've been working together in the past, man. And I was always just really inspired by you and the work that you did. And you're an author as well. You've got a bunch of books. You recently just released this book. But before we talk about the book, tell us a little bit about you. You got such a fascinating story, man. Fashion industry to tech industry and all that stuff in between. Tell everybody out there a little bit about your backstory, man. It's so fascinating.
I've been characterized by one of my friends as the king of useless information. And then the next day I'm called a Renaissance man or a polymath. I don't know, man. The stuff is just in my head and I just do it. I mean, I especially now, a little bit later in life, I do what makes me happy.
I love it.
I don't worry about if I have enough time to do it or not. I do what makes me happy. So yeah, grew up in Fairborn, Ohio, sleepy little town next to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Went to the big city, New York City, back in the 80s and studied fashion design and started my international career there, traveled all around the world. I've had the great fortune of working with a lot of really fantastic people. And in my role, especially in the beginning where I worked in the textile industry, it was a lot of research and design. So I still do research and design today, right? As a UXer, that's what I do. But somehow or another, my career has always had a tech component to it. I mean, even before I went to FIT, I worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base as a clerk typist.
Oh, wow.
But we got some word processing systems, and these things were like cutting edge back then. And the base commander actually found out that I had put together a course to teach a lot of the admins how to use this system. He asked me to come and teach him. So
that's cool, man.
From way far back, as I continue to think about this thread of tech has been in my life for a long time. So yeah, back here in Cincinnati now, lived mostly on the East Coast for the majority of my adult life, but back here in Cincinnati and digging it. Started these events, started doing these things. I've gotten involved in some of the communities, had my own meetup for a little while where I kind of flipped the script and had the people who were participating actually facilitate design thinking sessions virtually. Yeah, it's been cool.
Small world, man. I moved up here. We met each other working that place we were at. We don't need to give them a shout out.
That place we were at.
But man, what a small world. Yeah, you've been doing so much cool stuff. It's really awesome. We're going to talk to you today about your most recent book, Unleashing the Power of UX Analytics. So let's talk a little bit about this. Let's get into it. Tell us a little bit about how this book came about. Why now? Why'd you write this book? And what was the sort of impetus for writing Unleashing the Power of UX Analytics?
Pact Publishing actually came after me for this book. Apparently, it had been something sitting on their shelf for a little while. They're like, you can't find the right person to write this. And then all of a sudden, I get the call from them. But my goal for the whole thing was not to just focus solely on what analytics can do for you as an output. I wanted to show that as a portion of what UXers do, this grand macrocosm of everything that has to go on in order to make sure that the analytics work the right way in the first place. So it's not just about UX analytics tools. It's about research. It's about the North Star statement. It's about how you talk to people. It's about how you really look at the data. So there's a lot of things involved to me and what a good UX analytics practice should be. So they pitched me on the idea. I thought about it, kicked it around for a little bit. When I gave them my vision for what the book should be, they came back and wholeheartedly like, yes, that's perfect. Okay, let's go ahead. We jumped in and we got to work. I had some great editors, a great team at Pact to work with on this. So it was a really good partnership.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple things in there that I really want to dig into. The first thing you mentioned, I think a lot of people would be like, North Star. What the hell does North Star have to do with analytics? And I think, Google Analytics has probably ruined this for most people, most teams. But when people think of analytics, they think, we'll throw the software on there, it'll track all the stuff. And when we need it, we'll go back and we'll look at it. I want to hear a little bit. You called out North Star specifically. I think this is really important. Talk about North Star and why that's so important when you think about analytics.
You have to know what you want. And if you don't write the North Star statement the right way, You don't know it. Now, of course, before you get there, you have to be talking to users. You have to be talking to people who don't have what they need right now, which, right, is where our UX research comes from. When you and I work on a project together and you're the designer and I'm the researcher, I have to be able to come to you and say, this is what I've found. And all the research and all the digging, here's what I've found. I package that up in a way that when I give it to you, you probably have some clarifying questions for me, but you have a much better understanding of what the expectations are from the users, the stakeholders, whoever it is that we've spoken to. So a North Star statement in this context is that statement that everybody on the team agrees, kind of lays out what we're looking for outcomes. You mentioned outputs, right? And the things that you would be concentrating on as a designer. Over here on this side, though, as we're starting, if we're going to do this thing right, we have to know what the outcomes are that people are expecting. So that's what we write into the North Star statement. We will research and design this for this persona, this user role, so that they can do XYZ, whatever it is that they told us that they need to do. And then once we start plugging in these UX analytics tools, what's coming back serves that purpose and allows everybody else that's working on this project to ensure that first they're getting the right analytics back, but they also know what to do with it when it comes back and who can access it and what else they might need to be able to do.
And when I think about North Star, like I feel like to me, this is sort of one of those things where, a lot of companies, a lot of teams, even for the roadmap in general and the product, the North Star, a lot of times is something that nobody ever thinks about. And I just want to clarify, maybe speak to this a little bit, but when you say North Star, we're talking about North Star specifically for analytics and why we're doing it, why we're tracking things, what we're tracking, how we're going to track it, how we're going to use it, versus a North Star vision for maybe the product itself or the company. And those things obviously should align. Talk a little bit about that and how that North Star for analytics is not exactly the same or is a maybe a sibling or a child or something, maybe. I don't know how you would describe that, of that company's overall North Star vision.
Yeah, you can look at them. I mean, you could look at it as part of a parent-child relationship, of course, or a hierarchy or a taxonomy, in that what we get back from the UX analytics could be part of the taxonomy of the overall North Star and what the company needs, right? Because companies all have KPIs. They've all got these key performance indicators that they know they need to be able to hit and move to. So if a team is thinking about this correctly, and if the team is collaborating with those other teams that sit a little bit higher up the food chain, then they're going to mesh and they're going to work right together somehow or another. So yes, not the big gigantic North Star of the company or the corporation or the division, but a North Star that points directly to that other one at the very end. It might not be specified, it might not be stated as such, but if everybody's working together, and if you're in an environment where there aren't a ton of silos and people get to collaborate back and forth, kind of like some of the work that I've done out on the road, where I've been able to bring two very siloed divisions within a company together and have them understand that if they're rowing in the same direction, so to speak, things are going to get done a lot easier.
One of the things that I've kind of come across too, and you just said this, and I think this is important, everybody's working together. And you mentioned in the book, I was going to talk about it a little bit later in the show, but maybe this is a good time to talk about it, is, part of analytics is not just capturing the data. A lot of it has to do with the politicking, maybe you could call it the stakeholder management, the, understanding and getting them involved and getting their buy-in. Because the last thing that's going to work, or maybe it wouldn't work, maybe there's no chance of having it work, is where the UX team goes off and tries to do this on their own without those stakeholders actually being engaged from the very beginning. And so
never works.
I was going to talk about this later, but I want to talk about this now because I think this makes sense tying it to the North Star.
Yeah, cool.
Let's talk about stakeholder engagement, stakeholder management, and how important that is for a UX analytics platform or program, let's say program, to actually be effective.
Yeah. You start off with the stakeholders, and that's the research aspect, because the stakeholders represent the business, and the business represents the overall goals of the company, the corporation, the division, no matter what it is. Doesn't matter what it is. But those stakeholders are the people that you need to get business needs from first. So we always, I always teach, and we always start off interviewing the stakeholders first. We will interview as many as there are. In some big projects, there are several stakeholders, and some there are just one. But we interview that stakeholder a little bit differently than we would the regular users, because we're trying to get that higher level. We're trying to get that up top that says what the business needs. And you've probably seen my Venn diagram where I put together business and stakeholders up top, and then there's a little bit of overlap between them and the users, because the users need to understand what the business is saying they need, and the business needs to understand what the users are saying they need to help them get there. The analytics works into that, where if you're doing the UX analytics and you've got a really good practice like that, they're all pointing directly to that nice little slice in the middle of that Venn diagram, where business understands what's going on down there and they understand what's going on up there.
One of the things that I'm curious about, and I want to come back to some strategies for stakeholder management a little bit later, but I just wanted to cover that concept that it's so important to get these people involved from the top. I want to go back now to that idea of the North Star. And I think this is something that's very foreign to a lot of UX teams, especially immature UX teams that don't have a specific analytics practice. And I think a lot of people may even be surprised that there is a separate kind of quantitative analytics practice on a lot of bigger teams. Most smaller teams, just like I said, assume, we'll throw Google Analytics on there and we'll be good. We'll check the data when we need it. But there's so much more in strategy involved to actually doing this well. I want to talk about the North Star a little bit. Maybe if you could give an example of what a North Star might sound like, and maybe generalize one of your last ones. You don't have to give away what you actually worked on before.
Sure.
But it'd be interesting to kind of hear that from you.
All right. So right off the cuff, let's see here.
I threw you a curveball here. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. That's good. Make you think on your feet, right? We are going to research and design a UX analytics project that will serve our international sales team by giving them metrics pertaining to customers, their average annual spend, length of time they have been with the company, reasons why they might have dropped us as a supplier, where in the world they're coming from. We could probably add a couple more on that, so that we can get back some customers maybe we lost with better customer service practices, increase our income in Latin America to serve the new division we just opened there, and to give our stakeholders, right? Let's work the stakeholders in, and to give our stakeholders a higher level overview of how they can be planning business for the next 5 years.
So I love it. So I just, break it apart a little bit here. And it's interesting. I want to try to break it apart just so I could see if I'm getting this correctly. Yeah. So I heard a lot of things in there, and it's long, but that's the thing. These things should be long because they should be very specific, right?
It can be.
And so you called out very specific things that the team would be able to do with the data.
Right.
You tied it at the end there towards a new thing we opened up in Latin America. And you're showing, I assume, in this imaginary company, there's a overall KPI of improving sales in Latin America or doing something in Latin America, and you're showing how this will help them get there. You're defining scope very specifically.
Yeah, in the real world, if I may, I've used this in hospitals. I've used this with law enforcement. The hospital is a really, really good example, because we had metrics, we had overall user scores, we had qualitative metrics from customers and from patients on this entire hospital. And what we found out through all the research that we did was that Chuck, who ran this hospital unit over here, had much higher scores than the others. Well, why? So we broke that all down. And when we had this all out on a wall in our design thinking session, We had a big chunk on one side of the wall. We had a smaller chunk on the other side of the wall, which was Chuck. So when the VPs all came in, when the stakeholders all came in, they said, well, all right, what's that over there? That's Chuck. Well, why is Chuck over there? Because Chuck works a little bit differently. And through all the metrics that we've looked at, Chuck is scoring higher. He runs a more efficient division. He's getting much higher quality scores when people do the surveys. When they go out, he's getting this that the other folks aren't getting. All right, so what should we be doing? We should be teaching the other people how Chuck does his business. Now, it's not going to completely overrun everything else that they're doing because they're efficient as well. It's not that they're doing things poorly. It's not that they're getting bad scores, but it's Chuck has something dialed in here, which we can probably teach everybody else. Okay, that's what we'll do, right?
And what's interesting too, and this is something that you call out in the book as well, is this idea of change management. So, we talk about stakeholder management. Obviously, it's different from change management, where we need to get our stakeholders to go from point A to point B. And a lot of times, let's face it, most teams are working in low maturity environments where there are probably disjointed processes. It's not really repeatable. If you think about all the maturity models, you're probably somewhere around the middle, usually according to some of the survey results that we've seen. So the chances are very good that this thing is not just going to work off the bat. You're trying to get a team to go from point A, current state, to point B, future state. And there's this change management piece that needs to happen. I want to talk a little bit about, from your experience, change management and, very high level. We don't get too deep, but how do we navigate that change with some of these stakeholders? Assuming, some stakeholders are kind of wishy-washy. Some might even be supportive. Some might be, downright antagonists in a way. Talk a little bit about that if you can, and some strategies that some of these UX teams can have or can use to sort of navigate that landscape and get to where they want to go.
I thought about this earlier as we were talking through some other things. You always need a champion. You always need that person who sits at that VP level or is a little bit higher up the ladder to be a champion to understand. And not always easy, but as well as those people who, yes, can be antagonistic, you are going to have at least one or two people that love what you're doing and agree that this is the right thing to be doing. So in change management, having that champion is great because now that champion sits at a level where even though you might have these antagonists, when you get all those people in a room, you now have an evangelist for doing this the right way in that champion. And it's somebody I look for. I start off at a new company, and back in that world where we went to offices and did that kind of stuff.
I remember that. Yeah.
My first question was, where does this person sit? Where does this person sit? Where does this person sit? So I would look at the org and I would go knock on doors. Hey, my name's Jeff. I'm your new UX guy here. I would love to sit down and talk to you for 30 minutes. Can I get some time? Tell you what we're doing, show you what we're up to, see if I can get you to be a part of this team that's going to move this forward. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Here's my calendar right here. When do you want it? So the change management piece is, there's always the aspect of it of don't make me think. We've got that great book out there. Don't make me think. Don't give me extra stuff to do. If you're changing things the right way, you're going to make stuff easier for them, right? If you've been brought in to build a new software system that will allow those salespeople to understand their customers better, to increase customer service scores, to get back those companies that they've lost because things were too hard to do before. Change management piece of that is the psychology of getting people to understand, look, yes, you think you're really efficient, but how long did it take you to manually figure out that process that you're using right now? Well, I've been tweaking it for the last year. Took you a long time to get to that. You can't teach that to anybody else, right? You may have a gray beard like I do, and you may be wanting to retire sometime, but you can't teach that to somebody else because it's all in your head and it's all on your computer. It's not out there where anybody else can get to it. So now what we're going to come in and do is we're going to come in and we're going to streamline a lot of these processes. We're going to get rid of these 3 databases because you're the only person that uses them, or you and a couple of other people. So it's in framing everything in a way that makes them understand, while yes, at the very beginning, they may have to learn a few new things, but it's going to free them up. It's going to make their life so much simpler. And back when you and I worked at that same company, and I was getting on planes and going to places, and we sat down and talked to a lady who had 8 different software systems.
It's crazy, man.
That she had to balance and work back and forth between.
Copy and paste and everything. Yeah. Oh, it's insane.
Exactly. To try to make sense and to let the people who were doing the hard work know what was coming and what wasn't coming. And me and one of our other buddies figured out a way to streamline that down to just 2 different systems. And the 2 different systems talk to each other, and saved her 75% of her day.
It's crazy. And they don't even realize it. The thing that I love about what you're talking about here too is, like, we're talking about your book and UX analytics and more quantitative type analytics and stuff. But this is so important across the board. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're doing UX design, quantitative research, qualitative research, just, accounting. I mean, even accounting, like this kind of stuff. Like, these concepts are just so universal. And I love that you're calling this out in the book, and instead of just, talking about how to capture the data, maybe what to do with it. This is like,
that's just a tiny little part.
Exactly, man. This is something I say all the time, but you can't build great software without great relationships. And the first week on the job, this first month on the job, if you're trying to get in and do stuff and change stuff, you're doing it wrong. The first couple of weeks, you got to get in there and just meet everybody and understand. And, this concept, we talk about empathy for users all the time, but like empathy for stakeholders and what they care about and what their pain points are and how you can help them, and if you can figure that out, you can get anything done. You get those champions, those champions, find the champion. That's it. And you called out, I want to call out something too. You use the word evangelist. This is so important. Like because you're not going to be in all these meetings with these people. Having somebody who can vouch for the things that your team is doing outside, when you're not there in another meeting with other most likely really important people too, and finding those allies, it's so important.
It is.
I think that's so critical. I love that you're calling us out in the book. All right. So next up, I want to talk a little bit about UX analytics and talk about how we use, and I'm not sure if you covered this in the book, I don't recall, but UX analytics and quantitative and qualitative together. Tell me a little bit about that. How do you see, teams being able to take, something where we go do a user interview and then using data that we're capturing from a system in the background, analytics and stuff. How do we use those two things together to actually drive change?
Let's imagine a scenario where we're looking at all the quant, and we know that we have 1,000 users that hit our system every 30 minutes. We've got an average of 1,000 people on our system, in our system, buying our stuff, doing what they need to do. The only thing we know about that quant, the only thing we know about that data, the only thing we know about those customers is that there are 1,000 of them. Every 30 minutes, we can count approximately 1,000 people in our system. What we don't know is if they're having a good time.
Why?
Right? We don't know how many times they had to back out of a system because they couldn't figure it out. We don't know how long it's actually taking them to get done what they need to get done. So that's where the qual comes in. That's where we're asking a different set of questions that back up that quant. Because if you see that you've got 1,000 people in there every 30 minutes, 650 of those people could be stuck. They could still have it open, but they're trying to figure out how to get to it, or they're on the phone with their CSR, their customer service rep. They're on the phone. Hey, I'm trying to order this new stuff that you guys said you had, but I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this. That's your qual right there. You're not capturing it with the fact that you're counting the clicks or you're doing anything else like that, or you know that you got all those people in there. So those two stories have to be put together. And that's a really big thing. I go back to this hospital thing again, but it was a huge thing in the hospital. How many meds did we disperse this morning on this morning shift? How many meds did we? How many did we miss? Okay, well, why might we have missed that? Well, it's because this is Ontario, Canada, and we do have snowstorms, and 6 of our nurses in that ward couldn't make it in because their cars were stuck. You never have the whole picture if all you have is quant. You never have the whole picture if all you have is qual. You need to be able to marry those two together. You need to be able to think of scenarios just like I'm talking about, and think about these scenarios in terms of, yeah, we got all these numbers, but what do these numbers actually mean for us? Are they good? Are they bad? Are they trending up? Are they trending down? Is trending up really good, or is that really bad?
Yeah,
Right?
right.
Like
Yeah.
people bailing after 30 seconds and not doing what they do. If that trend goes up, man, that's bad. You know, that you don't have things working the right way. So yes, you can create the right kind of a story if you have both. You're only looking at part of the picture if all you're looking at is one piece of that.
So here's the thing I want to talk about next is taking that data. You mentioned telling a story. I want to talk about using the data to drive decision making, because the whole point of this, obviously, is to capture data so that we can make a decision. You mentioned this in your North Star too. So I want to talk a little bit about some tips, techniques, or tricks effectively using that data to actually drive decisions.
All right. So let's work together on this. You give me a scenario. You're now the stakeholder. You now represent business. You give me a tight little scenario.
Oh, geez.
And we'll walk through that.
I'm putting you on the spot. No, you're putting me on the spot.
Come on.
All right.
Exactly.
Let's
Fair
see.
point,
Okay.
man.
Let's use your example of South America. So we just opened this office in South America, and we are not getting the sales that we expected to get. How can we improve our numbers in our new office or our new region in South America? How's that? Is that good?
That's good. That's good. Okay. So what's your goal? What's the revenue goal for South America?
I'm throwing this random number out there. 10 million. 10 million this year, I guess. Is that low? That might be low.
What are you at right now?
I am currently at first quarter Q1. Let's see. So 10 million for the year. And let's do this right. We have KPIs. We want to hit 10 million each year. Our KPI each quarter should be 2.5 million. So we are trending low for it's almost the end of the quarter, and we are at 1.75 million.
0.75.
And we need to be at 2.5.
How many salespeople do you have covering that region?
Oh gosh. I don't know anything about sales. We have 20.
You're making this up.
20.
Hey, we're teaching right here. We're teaching a process right here.
There you go.
On the spot.
I love it. This is perfect. All right. I love this. We have 20 salespeople.
Okay.
Is that a lot? I don't even know. Is that not enough?
20 salespeople. Are any of them actually located in South America?
Good question. Half. We've got the other half in our headquarters in Cincinnati.
In Cincinnati. Okay, so half of them are sitting here in Cincinnati. You got half. So you've got road warriors down there in South America. You've got people who are putting boots to the ground, and they can actually get out into these companies, right?
Yep.
Okay. Do any of the people in South America work in collaboration with people back at home in Cincinnati? Like, are they paired up as teams, or how? Tell me how that works.
Oh God. Okay. So let's say we expect them to collaborate.
Okay.
So we have asked them to collaborate.
Okay.
We get into like some sociology, psychology stuff here, I guess. But this is the good. The qual stuff. So we expect them to collaborate. We've partnered. Yeah, we've partnered. We've have them in groups. Let's say partnered to 1-to-1. How's that?
Okay.
I don't know if that's official or not. I have no idea.
So I remember reading when we were going to open up to South America market. What I don't remember is if we have storefronts that people walk into.
Oh, geez. We're more B2B. So we are actually doing
B2B.
Yeah, we're selling to companies. So we're more like warehousing. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. I do remember that now. Okay. So there are some problems then, right? We're not where we need to be right now. So there are some problems. We need to increase this first quarter by about another 35 to 40% to get, about 30 to 35% to get where we need to get to. So we need to determine where the problems are. So what I would suggest that we do first is we start talking to all those people in South America. We get them all together. We can create, we could even create a survey at the very beginning and send a very particular, very pointed survey out to everybody, all 20 of those people. So you got 10 here, you got 10 down there. Send the survey out to them to start off to try to figure some things out. My guess is, based on other work that I've done, might have some trouble with shipping, and you're just not getting shipping to those people the right way. Our manufacturing cycles are just a little bit too long. So this is something else that we need to understand. So that can be some quant data right there, right? We're supposed to be putting out 400,000 widgets a month. If we find that we're only putting out 200,000 widgets a month, that means that people don't trust that we have what they need, right? We don't know what quality of the products are. How many returns are we getting per month? Do we have people out there that have returned to us so many times that they just don't want to do business with us anymore? So that's not quality metrics, that's quality products. But we find out the quality from asking those types of questions. So there really wouldn't be any way for me to tell you definitively right now how we can increase business in South America until we do this legwork up front. And that might even include me going. You and I will hop on a plane.
Oh, yeah.
We'll go down to South America. We'll hit some of the facilities down there.
Stop off in Rio, get some
We'll talk to some people. That's it. We'll talk to some people. We'll set it up so that everybody understands the expectations. We'll know that we can get to stakeholders. We'll know that we can get to warehouse folks, forklift drivers, report writers, right?
Well, a couple of things I want to highlight that as we were talking. I just want to, again, highlight this fact that analytics is not just user data. It's not just number of clicks. It's not just data coming from some app that you, or some JavaScript you throw in your app and collect, user data. We're talking about, analytics around all kinds of things, business operations, sales numbers, anything like that. And what I find in a lot of companies is the UX team especially is always just relegated to dealing with the interface of a thing. And it's so important, we talked about silos. It's so important as a UX team. If you're a junior designer, you probably don't have a lot of control over this, but these are things that you can be bringing up to your boss. And, even if you're a junior designer, you should be having one-on-ones with people and talking about these things.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised how much influence you can have if you just attempt to change the conversation. And, as a UX team, you probably have very little control, but that doesn't mean you can't expand your influence when you expand your network and at work, right? We talk about networking all the time, but people always think it's like, oh, I network to get a job. You network when you're at work. You network with other people, just like you said, knocking on doors and going to people. It's the same thing. And when you start to say, your product manager comes to you with a feature and you say, why are we building this? And then maybe they have a good answer, maybe they don't. But if you can start to tie some of those questions, like if we're, let's say I'm on the UX team in our example, a lot of the problems that you're having are completely unrelated to the interface design, right?
Yeah.
This is all stuff that goes back up the chain. And if you want to be seen, especially over time, as more strategic thinker or a more important integral part of that overall corporate or business metrics and KPIs and business value. We talk a lot as UXers. How do we deliver business value? This is it. This is exactly it. Yeah. Tying all those things back to other stuff and saying, if we were to do this, we could help improve that business metric. We could help improve sales. Yeah. We could actually help improve and if you could start throwing those according to our Q1 our last year's stock holders meeting, I heard our CEO talk about the importance of increasing sales in Latin America. If you're a UX designer and you're saying those things and your team isn't taking you seriously, you're on the wrong team. But more often than not, someone's going to hear you say that and be like, wow, I never expected a UX designer to talk about sales numbers in South America before. But when you can that's how you start to show, your business value. And so, this is just something that I think is so important to kind of highlight, is just that we're not talking about simply, bounce rates and numbers. We're talking about how those
Right.
things can then tie up to other things. Maybe those numbers are actually showing some kind of downward trend, but that qualitative piece is like, well, you can't get me the stuff on time. Your
Yeah.
shipping is so late, or you can't manufacture stuff, or the quality is terrible. I get this part and it's a piece of junk. And so,
Yeah.
I love that you're calling this out, because I think this is so important, especially for junior designers, to think about. It's not all user metrics and data coming from Google Analytics or, whatever other Amplitude or whatever other software your team is using. And I think that's just such an
Right.
important thing. I don't know if you have any other thoughts there, but I feel like that's just so important.
Well, no, that all points back to the book. I grabbed the book and I'm thumbing through the book here again because part 4 is strategy. That's why I left the very last part of the book is tactics, because I really want everybody to understand the strategy part. I want them to understand how to talk to people. I want them to understand the human aspect of it. Just like you're saying, it's not just those numbers that you get from Google Analytics or whatever else you've got there. The goals part is huge, right? So the parts of the book are the introduction to UX analytics, and then part 2 is goals, part 3 is research, and research is a big section. And then part 4 is strategy, and then part 5 is tactics. So if you think about it like that, if you think about those 5 parts as the 5 key building blocks of a great UX analytics practice, then you got it.
Exactly.
It's just like looking at quant and qual as being those things that need to come together to tell you the right story. We talked about story a while ago. It comes back to story.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's so important to understand too. And I love that you put that last, because the tactics are irrelevant if you're not doing the right stuff for the right reason and helping the right people in the first place. You could do this,
Bingo.
you could hit the ground running and do a million things. It's not going to matter if none of that other stuff was done. So the next thing I
Right.
want to talk about though is socializing the results. So you get all this data, you got all this information, as a UX team, or hopefully you're working with your product team as well to help kind of shape these things. But what do you do with the data? Once you get it, how do you actually make change with it?
If you follow this Silicon Valley product group, you're working in 3-legged stools. And a 3-legged stool in this day and age is always a UXer, an engineer, and a product person. That's your 3-legged stool. That's your tightest bit of collaboration on a team right now. Now, it's possible that you don't work that way, and that's okay. That's okay. Just remember, though, that your engineers are super important. They think a very different way than you do as a UXer, but they're very, very important to you, as are the product people, your product managers, or whoever else you're working with. So socializing all that is all about doing a readout at the very end. And your readout isn't complete. It's not the best readout unless it's you and a product person and an engineer. If you're a designer, maybe it's the researcher that helped feed you that. But yes, socializing all this, you're going and you're taking to them what you're finding. Here's what we're finding. Here in qualitative data, here's what we're finding. In quantitative data, here's what we're finding. So here's the story that we've written to help explain this all to you. People love stories, right? People love narrative, especially if you tend to be an animated speaker. Not like me. I'm not an animated speaker, so don't take your cue from me. No, you have to be able to put it in terms that people understand, right? So you're going to pull the technical jargon out. You're going to talk to people in language that they can understand, and you're going to make it compelling, but you're also going to make it known that it's not biased. Bias can come up, and I talk about it in the book. Bias can come up when you're doing your research, if you're leading people into answers that you want them to hear. And sometimes this can get flipped in companies where a product team has already determined we're going to do this.
Yep.
No matter what, we're going to do this. Yeah, but the research shows that that's probably not the best way to go because of XYZ 1, 2, 3, whatever it happens to be. Well, no, but this is what we were told that we have to build. Okay, you can, but your user acceptance is going to be 15%, if you even get that. And you need 45% user acceptance. if we just tweak a little bit, if we just step back and reset a tiny little bit, we can make these couple of changes, and you'll get to where you need to be, and you'll please the majority of the people that you need to.
Back in episode, I think it was 58, if I'm not mistaken, I talked with Dr. Ari Zelmanow about his ideas for like turning your research team into a newsroom. And that was like really cool. So if you're listening, check that episode out, because that was awesome insights about how to like just constantly share. Like, and this is kind of what you're talking about. It's like, it's not done. You just said this, right? Like, you don't wait until it's done, because you know, it's never done. You just like, you share stuff. You found stuff, you share stuff. You found stuff, you share stuff. And you make sure you're socializing this stuff. And if you don't do that and you just work in a corner, you work in your little hole and you never talk to anybody and let them know what you're doing, they're going to think you're doing nothing.
That's death. Yeah, exactly. That's death.
They are going to think you're doing nothing. I love that.
Pop out something on Slack, pop out something on Teams, send an email to a bunch of people, you know, no matter what your org structure looks like, send it out. And, you know, some people, I think some people are actually afraid of seeming like they're flooding people with information, like sharing too much. You know what? You can cut that stuff down to some little bite-sized chunks, but yes, you need to keep showing what's going on over here, so that when you show somebody at the very end, if you're doing a big readout at the very end, there are no surprises at that point in time. People already know exactly the direction you've had to go in.
Oh my God, yeah.
People already know the hoops you had to jump through. People already know that in 2 months, it was impossible to get this stakeholder back on another call. You got access to the stakeholder one time, and that was it. But you filled that in with some line managers, with some users, with some report writers, with a bunch of other people who were integral to getting that work done. You filled in with them instead because you had to.
Now, you just said something too. I just want to like call this out. You should not be going into these meetings without everyone already, at least let's say most of the people in the room, knowing what's coming already. Because all you're doing, if you come in there and nobody has any idea what you're going to say, you are just setting yourself up for that meeting to just be completely derailed, for people to interject in the middle of your presentation and ask you a million questions that, you know, you didn't expect them to ask, and like for that meeting to just completely go off the rails. The only time maybe that I would say if people like is if you get the CEO or some really high level executive that, you know, has like 5 minutes and that's it. But even then, you should be talking to people that have worked with that person before, or their executive assistant, or somebody to know how they might react or what they might want to talk about. Or, you know what I mean? So like, do your research there, do your investigation and due diligence to figure out like how to talk to that person, you know? So that's so important, because if you're not keeping people up to date constantly, and it's just like, oh, wow, we haven't heard from you in 6 months. Thanks for the update, Jeff. And then, you know, like it's just, it goes off the rails, and people think you're doing nothing. And then they get this thing with all this information and it's too overwhelming. And, you know, even if everything was perfect, all that information can overwhelm them and they need time to think. They might not have time to ask questions because they haven't really like thought about it yet. So, you know, I think that's so important. Like, make sure you're keeping them. And again, those one-on-ones, all that stuff, like having the stakeholder management. This is why that's really important. A communication plan. You're constantly, you know, talking to people, keeping them informed as you go. All that stuff is super critical. I love that you call that out.
Let's go back to, can we back up just a little bit too? Because you made me, as you were talking through that, you made me think about something else too.
What you got?
And this kind of has to do with bias, and how when you're interviewing, it's a certain protocol that you want to follow when you're interviewing. Again, at the hospital, time to interview the stakeholder. Okay, cool, great. We're going to interview the stakeholder, and we're going to bring the VP in too. No. Do not do that. You will not get the answers you need from that stakeholder with their VP in the room. Oh, no, it'll be okay. They're good friends. They go out and have beers together. Everything will be fine, Jeff. 2 seconds after those people walked out of the room, everybody else on that team slapped the desk, slapped their heads. Okay, Jeff was right. We didn't listen to him. He was not honest with you because his VP was sitting right there with him, right? So now we've got biased opinions about things, and we don't have the truth of the matter because that stakeholder was afraid to be super honest in that space because of that VP sitting.
And you know the funny thing about biases? you always think you're the one. That's actually a bias. What bias is that? There's a bias. Like, I think I'm not going to fall for the bias. And of course we always do. That's a bias on its own, but you always think you're not going to fall for it. And of course you do every time.
Right.
Like it's impossible to avoid them. The only thing you can do is be aware of them and try to mitigate them. So I think that was a really good one too. Like, that's like, I don't know, divide and conquer sounds so violent, but getting those people one-on-one, like you said, because when you get a big group of people, you get groupthink, or the most important person in the room controls the conversation. And it always happens, like without fail. I love that you call that out.
And there are times for that. There are ways that you can use that to your advantage, but not up front where you're trying to really get the lay of the land and really understand the work that needs to be done, which is, to me, this is all UX analytics too. I mean, I know some people don't think of UX research as UX analytics, but it really is, because you're getting the metrics, you're getting the info you need to have the best picture of what you have to fix, right? And I think you and I may have talked about this before. You're either inventing something brand new or you're improving something that exists and doesn't work quite right. You have to know those differences as well.
Ahead of time. Yeah, exactly. And that's part of the research. That's part of going in and understanding that stuff. Like you're doing your research for your research. It's kind of funny. One of the things I want to understand a little bit is just tools in general. You talked about tactics. We're saving this to the end. You save yours to the end. We're talking about the end. Tactics and stuff, tools specifically. Are there any tools that you recommend for anybody out there who is not super familiar with all the stuff we're talking about? Different tools, aside from obviously Google Analytics is the first one I think most people think of. But what tools do you like that help you every day when it comes to this idea of analytics?
I think Hotjar is probably one of the best ones. And what you can do, what it can give you. Crazy Egg does pretty good. And these are the ones I mentioned in the book. I myself don't use those a lot. I have colleagues that do, and other people on our team tend to focus on those types of things. So I don't use those a lot. I know about them. I know how to use them. I know what I can get from them, and I like what I can get from them because of what you actually need to try to figure out to make sure that the tactics are the right tactics to do. So I honestly don't have strong recommendations for any of those over anything else. It's always a good idea to do your own due diligence, right? Plug into these things, get on the internet, start doing some research, find out, because you have to figure out what's going to work best for your company and your team and your budget. Everything comes down to budget too at some point in time. So again, like Jeremy, like you were saying a few minutes ago about, wow, who would have ever expected a UX person to talk about this kind of stuff? You want to be a really well-rounded UXer who's just starting to come up. If you want to be a principal, if you want to be an architect a little bit later on, which we had some great architects that we worked with at that big company that we worked with, right? We had some great people there.
Indeed.
But they were good because they were very well-rounded and they understood a lot of disciplines that go into this thing that we call UX. And a lot of people go make it pretty, right? Well, that's not what we do in UX. So yeah, I don't have any really strong recommendations on tools, honestly. Just take a look at what's out there, figure out what's going to work best for you in your situations.
Now you called something out, and or you said something. I want to call it out. You said, I don't use these tools, but my partners do, right? The colleagues do. And this is, I think, really important. You mentioned something like go make it pretty. A lot of times what happens is they'll say, product managers will go and say, design this interface for me, make it pretty. Or they might say, go run that report and tell me what it means. But if you're working with these people well in advance and you've got that North Star and you're planning it and they understand how to run reports, and then those people go and look it up for themselves, right? And so when they understand how that data will help them make the decisions they need to make and tie back to those business KPIs, that product team has access to Hotjar or Amplitude, and they can go and decide, like looking at the data themselves, and say, we have this decision we need to make. What is this data telling us? And if they know how to do it and they've been trained on that software, they don't have to ask the UX team every time they want to make a decision. And so if anything, you've made your job easier, right?
Easier.
So exactly. I think that I just want to call that out. You said it, but I think that's such an important thing to highlight, that if you're doing this right, it makes everyone's job easier, including yours.
Yeah. And remember too, as you're stepping through the career, like me at this point in my career, I've been around 25 years. I've worked all over the world. I worked in Washington, D.C. I worked in New York City for the very first business intelligence company. So at my level right now, I don't have to be the guy that's in those tools getting stuff out. Somebody else does that, and they compile it and they put it together. And as a team, we all get together. They do the readouts. Okay, here's what Hotjar's telling us right now. Here's what this is telling us. All right, well, what do you think that means? Well, if we look at this over here too, it means we probably have to make some decisions about this database or this workflow that we've got here right now. And now at that point in time, with these people coming to me and giving me these readings, it's my job now to figure out what we do, how we shift the process if we need to, how we talk to the stakeholders to make sure that they understand what needs to be done, how we bring some VPs in, how we talk to the CIO if the CIO is involved in that, or the CTO. So as we're working through these levels, people will do different things. They'll have different responsibilities. They'll have different roles. They are different personas. So at this point in my career, I'm more like a stakeholder persona than I am anything else. But I direct a lot of traffic. I make sure that everybody understands, as we've got this thing that we're marching towards, what we need to do, all those different steps in the RACI, right? A RACI is a good thing to use too.
I love those, yeah.
Who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, who's informed.
If you can get the team to fill them out. That's always been my challenge, is like getting people to actually fill the stupid chart out. The RACI charts are amazing if you can get someone to fill it out. I have a very hard time getting people to actually fill those out. I could fill it out, but that doesn't mean it's going to actually stick. The team actually has to say and agree, oh yeah, I will be accountable for that. I will be responsible. Very rarely does that actually happen in my experience.
That's it.
But that goes back to a lot of that low maturity stuff we talked about. All right. So what I want to talk about, next, last thing I want to talk about is sort of like the future of analytics. And we talk a lot about AI, and you mentioned you working in AI. So I'm curious from your perspective, how do you see things like AI kind of playing into some of this stuff that we're talking about as far as analytics goes in the next, several years or however far off you could predict?
I think your audience, your particular audience for this podcast, is sitting in the catbird seat. And for those of you youngsters who don't understand what all of us oldsters understand, that means you guys are sitting in a really great place. If you're fairly new to the job, you've been working for a little bit, you went to school and you did what you did, or you're self-taught like me, right? I don't have a big, gigantic degree in any of this stuff. I've taught myself. You're in the perfect position to take advantage of AI right now. The things that you can do and how much better the AI keeps getting. And it's one of those, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more people that use AI, the better the AI gets. The better the AI gets, the more people are going to want to use AI, right? So people are going to be jumping in at all different points. And if you look at ChatGPT, fastest growing technology in history.
Yeah, it's crazy.
History has blown away everything else. So the AI aspect, I couldn't say anything stronger about using AI. Do not be afraid of it. If you've got an AI group in your city, start going to it. A meetup, start going to it. We've got a phenomenal one here in Cincinnati, which I just invited you to. I think earlier I sent you something that said, you should definitely come to this. If you're already starting to work with AI, and if you're in a city that does not have an AI meetup, start it. Start it right now. Take that bull by the horns and start it. So I think there's no way for us to know what the future is going to look like. There really is no way for us to know. I mean, I'm working on a couple of projects. I heard people stand up and talk about projects they're working on. Cincinnati is hopping right now, Jeremy.
Yeah.
It really is, man. There's a strong AI community here. And it really excites me to know that things like this are going on around here. So the future of UX analytics is going to be coupled with the future of AI. I wrote that little article already this morning and put it up on LinkedIn. Who was my co-author? ChatGPT was my co-author.
Yeah. So one of the things that I was thinking, before I left my last job, we were looking at getting Amplitude put in, and Amplitude is a really cool piece of software. But one of the cool things they were integrating was a generative query system using AI. So, even if it's not necessarily telling you things, but it could, maybe in the future, it could be like predictively saying, hey, we're noticing these trends based on our models. It means this. It means something to you. Maybe you want to go investigate it. Or, a generative type thing is like, hey, instead of like clicking on 1,000 buttons to run a report, tell me about all my blah, blah, blah from blah, blah, blah. And then tell me between this time and that time, enter, in a sentence. And then boom, it gives you a report instead of having to save reports and everything else. So, those are like some really cool ways to use it just like as of today. But who knows, 5 years from now, AI is going to be so far beyond what I think I can even comprehend now that, maybe we'll have little chips in our brains 10 years from now and it'll just feed data into our heads without us even having to ask, so who knows?
Somebody just said that. My buddy sitting next to me at the AI meeting said that exact same thing the other night.
Oh my God.
He elbows me and he goes, look at chips pretty soon, man. They're coming.
Oh my God. But it's funny because like people are talking about like augmented reality, right? Like, augmented reality, having something in like I don't know, maybe like an implant in your eye or something. But what if it just feeds it to your head and you can just envision your like, that kind of, you can see stuff in your thoughts, right? You can picture stuff in your head. What if it just does that? And then you don't even need to have things to see it. You could just kind of intuitively know, oh, that's that stuff. Not? Like, you don't even have to have a visual piece. So it's like, it's just crazy. It's kind of frightening actually a little bit to think about, but anyway, it's kind of crazy.
It can be, but I mean, the things that we're doing today, nobody 10 years ago thought about. Maybe 2 people thought about it 10 years ago, but it's just like where we think we're going to be in 10 years. We can guess, we can speculate. Some people probably have some really good ideas, but most of us, we can't fathom where we're going to be 10 years.
It's funny. I just think about like, Back to the Future, flying cars and all the hoverboards. Yeah. It's like really not that much different, We had
roads.
Yeah,
where we're going, there are no roads.
It turns out there's still roads. But yeah, it's funny. We have this like high tech, kind of thing, and then the future is usually not nearly as
well. No, and you saw that in Minority Report as well.
Oh, right.
Where in the city they had all the things that were hugging the buildings, but then he got in the Toyota, I think it was, right, and drove out into the country to go see Dolores Cinnamon. So still this cross culture of super high tech, but also super low tech.
All right. So, Jeff, we've been talking for quite a bit now. We talked about a lot of stuff. Before we get out of here, I got some questions I want to ask you. But before we do that, anything else that we didn't get a chance to talk about that you think is important, you want all those people out there listening to know?
And let's see. Let me thumb through the book.
Thumb through the book. What did we miss?
we covered a lot of really good stuff. We did. We covered a lot of really, really good stuff. We talked about change management. We talked a little bit about digital transformation. All this rolls up into digital transformation. Content strategy and analysis is making sure that all these things that you're thinking about. If you've got a site that's heavy in content, if you publish white papers, any kind of marketing materials that you've got, you can use all of this to inform that and to understand how to write those things better. So content strategy is a big thing to get into and wrap in there as well. Aside from that, now you asked a lot of great questions. We covered a lot of really cool things. You let me riff a couple of times, so thank you for that.
Man. I love that stuff. I just interviewed Yadi Arroyo like not long ago. We talked about improv and stuff and how important improv is for UX design. And I was kind of thinking about that a little bit. Playing yes and going back and forth. I love that stuff. So before we get into those questions, Jeff, tell everybody out there listening, where can they find you? Where can they find your book? Give yourself a plug.
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, of course. The book, as Jeremy mentioned, is entitled Unleashing the Power of UX Analytics, Proven Techniques and Strategies for Uncovering User Insights to Deliver a Delightful User Experience. Yes, that is a very long subtitle,
but
all right. It tells what it is. That is on Amazon, and it's a pretty quick read. It's not a huge book, but I think it's got the right kind of stuff in it, and the feedback that I've been getting is that it's kind of on point. So that's where you can find it. Me on LinkedIn. I've got several Instagram accounts. If you live in Cincinnati and if you're interested in what we're doing for the AI event, that's an event called Cocktails and Creatives, and we'll start selling tickets for that in about another 2-3 months. We're in the planning stages right now, but you can look for Cocktails and Creatives on Instagram to keep up with it.
Cool, man. And do you have a website for the book or anything, or your website, or is it all just on Amazon?
I don't have a website for the book. That's all through Pact Publishing. So yeah, I don't.
But check it out on Amazon, wherever you find books. Is it like Barnes and Noble and stuff too?
And might be. I'm not sure. That's a good question.
Okay.
I don't know.
We'll check.
I do not know.
I'll tell you what. I'll go look, and then I'll
You go look and see if you can find it.
I'll reply. I'll re-record an outro or something here. All right, cool, awesome, Jeff. So before we get out of here, I got some questions that I want to ask you. I like to ask all my guests to help my listeners get to know all my guests just a little bit better. What is your favorite non-design book?
That was kind of a tough one for me to think about, because this book that is my favorite non-design book, and this is a work of fiction by Italo Calvino called "If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler." That was the most unique book of fiction that I had ever read in my life at that point in time. And this was 25, 30 years ago, maybe. But it remains this book that when I start talking about fiction or that with anybody, it's the book that I always mention. If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler by Italo Calvino is just simply amazing.
It's an interesting title. What is it about?
It is. It's almost like a mystery wrapped within a mystery, and it has to do with a book that people have different versions of, and they're all trying to figure out what the definitive version of this book was.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it's really amazing. It is really amazing. All right,
Hell
so that's my favorite non-design book. I'll say that.
I have to check that out. That sounds really fascinating. I love it.
It is.
What is your favorite non-design podcast?
I like Lewis Howes' podcast, The School of Greatness.
The School of Greatness.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lewis Howes, and it's Lewis and then Howes. He was a team handball player for a long time, but he now knows people around the world. He's won a lot of awards for the content that he puts out. School of Greatness podcast, and then he's got a self-development and educational podcast as well. So yeah, he's pretty awesome. Really, really cool dude. Knows his stuff, and he researches like you wouldn't believe.
Right on, man. All right, awesome. I haven't heard of that. I'm going to check it out. What is your favorite meal? This could be something you've cooked, something your grandma used to cook, something you got at a restaurant somewhere. You're always out and about all over town. I'm sure you've eaten at some good places all over the world.
Out and about. Well, I was going to say a really good tuna steak, but I'm going to go back because a friend of mine is leaving for Detroit. No, she already left for Detroit today. And I had the best pork chop I've ever had in my life at a restaurant in Detroit.
Ooh, how's it cooked?
Oh man, it's had some sort of almost like a blueberry kind of a compote that came with it.
Wow, okay.
And it was a monster big pork chop, really thick, but it was so juicy. It was so flavorful. It was amazing. So a good pork chop.
Oh man, dude.
A good pork chop. I'll also say one of the other things I look for as I travel around the United States is the best Cubano sandwich.
Oh, I love a good Cuban sandwich, man.
Any place I go, I look for a restaurant that has a Cubano, and I go and I try out their Cubano sandwich.
Man.
So
I love that.
Different versions of it throughout the United States, and I've traveled to a lot of places. I've had some really good ones. I don't have an absolute favorite yet.
Oh, okay. All right. Listen, let me give you one to try. If you ever go down to New Orleans,
okay.
Down in New Orleans,
yeah.
My buddy, actually, it's crazy because I used to go there all the time, and then we bought a house in Algiers Point, and turns out he was our neighbor. His name's Eric. He owns Killer Po' Boys. They got two locations, one in Aaron Rose's little bar, and they got one that's just like a standalone shop. Killer Po' Boys, they have a Cubano sandwich, but they do it on banh mi bread from like a local Vietnamese bakery. That? So, you know, like the Vietnamese sandwiches?
The Vietnamese stuff. Yeah.
So they're like little small po' boys. So normally, you know, po' boys come on like big old French bread, like Leidenheimer French bread, like 3 foot long French bread loaves, right?
Right.
But they do theirs, they're a little small banh mi size. And they do a Cuban sandwich. Man, oh God, it's so good, dude. Anyway, it's amazing. Actually, I say that this was
awesome.
I haven't been there in years since I moved, actually. So they might even be on the menu anymore. But anyway, Eric, my buddy Eric, man. Ooh, God, that place is amazing. Killer Po' Boys, dude. Check it out.
Cool.
Anyway, if you're ever down in New Orleans, Killer Po' Boys, even if that's not on the menu, everything there is delicious. But I love a good pork chop, dude. Like a good bone-in pork chop. You go to like a steakhouse, everybody gets like a steak or something. But man, I don't know, a pork chop. You know what else I missed dude, down in New Orleans? This isn't something I don't think a lot of people realize. You know, I don't know how maybe people do know this, but when you cook red beans down in New Orleans, my grandma used to fry up pork chops with the red beans. And a little thin, you know, 1/2 inch thick, you know, nothing too big, but you cast iron skillet, just some butter, some salt and pepper, maybe a little Tony's or something on there. Fry up both sides, get a nice little sear with red beans. Oh my God, dude, it's amazing. I don't know how many people know about pork chops and red beans, but if you're down from Louisiana or down south, you probably are eating pork chops and red beans. Oh, so good. All right.
Cool.
It's like almost lunchtime now, man. I'm starving. I want some like pork chops.
I know, I'm hungry too.
All right. What's your favorite vacation spot? You traveled around quite a bit. You probably have been some cool places.
Let's go with Hong Kong.
Hong Kong. Ooh, nice. I've never been to Hong Kong, man. I'd love to go somewhere.
And well, I've never actually gotten to vacation there. It's always been for work.
Oh, yeah.
But it's been for extended periods of times, like back when I was in the fashion industry.
You get a weekend. Yeah, you get a weekend. Sure. Yeah.
When I was in the fashion industry, we went to Hong Kong, and even though we were traveling around and doing things, we always had downtime. I love Hong Kong, man, on both sides of the harbor. Over on the mountainous side, over on the mainland side, just so many cool things to do in Hong Kong. Very international city. I love the vibe. I really love the vibe. So
that's awesome.
I'm going to say Hong Kong.
I've never been. You know, everybody gives like big corporations a lot of crap, but I will say one of the best benefits, I think, of working in a giant company with the travel budget is getting to go places for work. You know, I would have,
it's cool.
Europe, Singapore, Brazil, India.
Yeah.
Like I had an India trip planned like the week before I got laid off, and they canceled the trip, so I didn't get to go. But I was so excited. But you go for like a couple weeks and you get a weekend, you know, hang out, go explore. It's all paid for by the company, you know, but you still get to do like your tourist stuff. But I love that stuff. But
exactly,
that's awesome, man.
I'm gonna give one caveat to that too, because as much as I love Hong Kong, I have fallen in love with the desert Southwest.
Okay.
Like New Mexico in and around Santa Fe, Arizona in and around Scottsdale, some of those little towns up in the mountains.
Oh, it's
Desert Southwest has really captured my imagination lately. So I've taken a few trips out there in the last few years, and
that's awesome, man.
I'll be going out again. I don't know, sometime probably in the next 6 to 8 months. I want to take a trip back out again. So Desert Southwest, yes.
Yeah, dude. You know, absolutely. Americans, we always want to go abroad, you know, like Europe or South America or, you know, Asia or something. But there's so many places in the United States to go visit and see. And so many, you know, I don't know, it's one of those things, it's like in your backyard, so you kind of ignore it.
United States is amazing.
Beautiful places, man.
I went to St. Augustine in Florida for the first time about 6 or 7 months ago. I was down there for some work, and I saw that I was pretty close to St. Augustine. So rather than staying in Ocala, I'm like, nah, I'm going to stay in St. Augustine. And it's cool. It's a really cool place.
A lot of old, I guess that was like, the first city in America, right? 17 something.
Yeah,
so
it's like an old
pretty
town.
damn old, yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool.
I love it.
Really cool.
All right, what's your favorite design tool that is not Figma?
Oh, I hate Figma. I tell my team that every single day. Well, Figma this. And on Teams, they'll be talking about some stuff, and I'll just pop in there. I hate Figma. And everybody starts laughing. I hate Figma. Favorite design tool, man, right now for me, it's Midjourney. So
Midjourney, cool.
So we're drifting back over into AI again. I'm using Midjourney to create covers for my books.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
This competition thing that we do at Cocktails and Creatives is all about AI, and most of those people use Midjourney. I'm finding a lot of things that I can do with it. I can pop ideas in there. I can write stuff up in ChatGPT and put it in. But being a visual artist like I am, it's what I tend to do most things with right now. If I'm doing anything visual, I go into Midjourney, man. That's what I use.
I love it. I haven't really played around with Midjourney only because like Discord is like super confusing for me. I can't get into Discord.
Yeah, you got to get it set up the right way.
Yeah, I know. I use Dolly, and Dolly is, I don't know, junk in my opinion. The stuff the results I get from Dolly are usually not usable.
I know people using Dolly and they're creating some phenomenal things, but I can't figure Dolly out either. I really can't.
Yeah, I always just get like super inconsistent stuff, and it like I'm working on this book, and well, I guess when this comes out, it'll be done already. But I've got
you got a book coming out too. Yeah,
man, yeah. And I was trying to create like illustrations for the book, but like I couldn't get them consistent, and I was like, if I had money, I would pay somebody to do it, but I don't have any damn money. That's a problem.
Yeah,
but
well, I can probably give you some hints on that.
Yeah, we'll chat. Yeah, we'll chat.
Let's you and I hook up. Let's you and I hang out. I'll show you some things, Jeremy.
Let's do it. I'll show you the awful crap that Dolly was giving me. And anyway, cool. All right, Jeff. Well, this has been a lot of fun, man. Thank you so much. Before we get out of here, one more time, tell us about where we can find you and all that stuff real quick. One more time.
Okay. LinkedIn, just Jeff Hendrickson. I'm on there. Look for me. You'll see my picture. It looks kind of like what I look like right now. You'll see that. The book, the book one more time, Unleashing the Power of UX Analytics on Amazon. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, you can follow the Cocktails and Creatives or Jeff Hendrickson, Hendrickson is where I'm starting to put up stuff about other books that I'm writing too, because I do also write a series of self-improvement books.
Are you still doing the podcast?
I haven't done one in a while, but it looks like might take a little bit of a pivot. Me and another guy are talking about doing a different kind of a podcast.
Sweet, man.
So might start that, but you're like the fourth person that's asked me in the last week what happened to the podcast. Yeah, I know. I need to get going on the podcast.
Yeah, well, it's cool. You have your podcast to plug. Let everybody know out there. They might be interested in it.
Yeah. Sage Warrior Gentleman podcast. Everywhere. You can find it everywhere, just like you can find Jeremy's everywhere.
Hell yeah.
Sage Warrior Gentleman podcast. A little bit different way that I do it because I do have questions that I ask people, and it tends to be older folks who can be mentors to younger folks. Just like your mentor thing. That's what my Sage Warrior Gentleman podcast is pretty much all about. Is I'm asking people who have been out there in the world for a long time some really specific questions, but it's all very conversational.
Yeah, that's great.
So that somebody else can come in and they can listen to Paul's answers on this thing. They can listen to John's. They can listen to Mary's, and they can compare and contrast the answers that people give to learn some cool lessons. So thanks for asking me about that.
I think I've gone through like your entire catalog in there. Actually, I've listened to all of them. I think.
Cool.
All right, Jeff. Well, thanks so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. I think a lot of people out there that are kind of have this sort of like the wrong impression about analytics. I think this episode is going to help them out quite a bit to understand how important strategy is, how important the stakeholder management is, how important all that is before you ever start thinking about tactics. And I'm really excited to share this with everybody out there. Listen, I hope you guys got something out of it. So,
well, thanks.
Awesome. All right, Jeff.
Thanks for asking me to be on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Well, thanks for writing an amazing book. So thank you for that. Cool. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay. Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, all right, y'all. That's it for Jeff and me for today. I hope we helped shed a little bit of light on what UX analytics really is, how you might use it, and some of the thought that you have to put into it to actually make all that effort worthwhile in the first place. But I'm curious, anybody out there who's had similar problems that Jeff kind of talked through and been able to fix some of these things? I'd love to know about it. Let me know what you think on LinkedIn. Shoot me an email at hello@beyonduxdesign.com. I would love to hear from you. And if you like what you heard today, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would love it if you left a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you know. And if you know somebody who might find any of this stuff useful, then why don't you tell them about it? That would be fantastic. One more shout out to Ballant for leaving some fantastic feedback for the Beyond UX Design book. Don't forget, if you pick up the book from beyonduxdesign.com/book and you leave some honest feedback, you get a chance to win a shout out on the show just like this, a badass holographic Beyond UX Design sticker, a free book, or even a chance to have a one-on-one with me. So head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/book, use the promo code LISTENER to get 10% off your copy today. And if you want to help keep the show independent and ad-free, check out all those Patreon sponsorship packages at beyonduxdesign.com/support. You can join Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, and Kevin by supporting the show for as little as $3 a month. There's some awesome perks like that badass holographic Beyond UX Design sticker. You can get a shout out on the show every week. There's even a package to meet with me for 30 minutes every month. If you're looking for a UX course that's as unique as you are, do yourself a favor and check out Mento Design Academy. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/Mento. Use the promo code BeyondUX200 for $200 off the course. So join Mento and let your passions lead your learning journey. Remember to sign up for the newsletter and check out all the past episodes along with all the show notes at beyonduxdesign.com. I hope you keep coming back for more great UX tips from Beyond UX Design. And until next time, remember, you're more than a designer because there's more to UX and design. I'll see you around. Take care, y'all.
I completely lost what we were talking about there. I got so involved in everything else.
Socializing the data to make change.
Thank you. Thanks. There we go. All right. Back on track.
And action. There you go.